This video is going to show you a solo Grandmaster Nightfall getting platinum rank on the Devil's Lair on a Shadebinder Warlock. As you can see, this opening encounter, we're just sparring past all the enemies. Do not engage with any of them, and do not even take the Overlord Captain. The Overlord Champion in the opening encounter does not need to be taken for platinum rank. He's not considered for platinum rank because that champion despawns. Any champions that despawn are not considered for platinum rank in any Nightfall that you're doing, right? So as I said, you can skip him and come to this first room here. So as I said, I want to Shadebinder Warlock. We're going to get a Stasis nade down straight away and use AGER'S SCEPTER, the exotic trace rifle, which is Stasis, which synergizes with Stasis builds. Shadebinder is exceptional on the Stasis front. So is Revenant. Behemoth Titan not so much at all. But I believe this setup probably lends itself best for the Warlock, just because of the Stasis nade and things like that. It's pretty good on the Revenant with like a super type build, but you really don't need that, okay? Because you've got things like Font of Wisdom, which I'll go into sort of more of that stuff, what I'm using as the run goes on. But I did show the loadout at the start. I didn't do a comment on it because it was too long. This video is too long, okay? So I will litter things about my subclass throughout the run. But if you want to see every perk listed, like right now, just skip back to the start of the video. The first barrier champion, because of our setup, we use a Stasis nade. Make sure all acolytes, thrall are killed, then do a Stasis nade, hide behind cover, wait for that champion to be frozen, and then you can take him with your heavy, which we use in the linear fusion rifle Tarantula, with box breathing and field prep, which I'll talk more about why it's such a good linear. The bow that we chose was Imperial Needle, which has Frenzy on it, a void bow, an excellent bow in the game, one of the best. Frenzy bows are really good because they're good on enemies, red bars, yellow bars, orange bars, because it just gives you an increase to damage. There's nothing that you need to do, you just need to be near enemies, which you always near enemies. And it also works on champions. It's really good. You can continually overload champions. Explosive head bow, I'm sure you know, are the best bows. Yes, but frenzy bows are, you know, your next best thing, right? So a vorpal weapon bow is really good, but it's not very good on ads. Just bear that in mind if you're using a vorpal bow. It's good on the champions, but it isn't good on red bars. This is our first overload that we're going to take. So whenever you're dealing with overloads, it's all about positioning. It's where you're standing, right? And the key thing is to keep them continually overload, which is really easy if you just take them with the bow. It's a slower approach, yes. I could be using heavy between these stuns. I could be speeding this up, but this is overall more of a safer clear. It's not a speed clear. It definitely isn't. I mean, because of how Devil's Lair works, it's really ad dense. So you can't really solo speed farm this anyways. You know, a quick run. You're not going to be getting sub 30 minutes on a solo run on this, okay? Team runs, it's really good to farm it, you know, definitely, but not as a solo. This video, as I said, it's more focused on getting your initial clear solo and getting platinum while you're at it, so at least you get a weapon for your trouble. So this barrier knight here, you want to make sure you do a turret nade before you approach him, because this barrier will retreat to the solo wizards. You do not want that to happen at all costs. If you do that, you will significantly make this room slower, like a lot slower. When we freeze him, we then use our AGER'S SCEPTER. We consume super energy, because that's what the build requires, for you to melt a barrier. Without anti-barrier rounds with this build, you need to be consuming super energy with the trace. Because what it is, it will just continually freeze that champion while you're doing excessive damage to them. Which, like, may I remind you, this is Grandmaster difficulty, and there's a trace rifle being able to one phase solo one phase a barrier knight without anti-barrier. Like, that's insane to me. Like, this build worked out better than what I thought it would be. When it first came out, I was like, oh, this is really good and stuff. But I was wondering, how is it going to react on Grandmaster? And this is the first Nightfall, like, it's been, that I thought it would be really useful on. Exodus, it could have been useful on that, I guess. but it's really useful on this Nightfall, and as I said, it worked out really well. So with this part here, there's 2 snipers at the back of the map. There's 2 solo wizards, one arc captain, and then 1 overlord, and a bunch of like dregs and vandals. So because of our burns, we've got arc. We haven't got solar, but we'll rely on stasis, because stasis can sort of penetrate match game shields better than any other unmatched weapon. So say for example, you've got a solar shield, but you use arc on that solar shield. It'll take a while to take it down, whereas if you use stasis on a solar shield, you will penetrate that shield easier because it's stasis. It has that sort of effect. So that's how we can sort of bypass solar shields, because there is a couple, but there's only, I believe, 5 solar wizards in the whole thing, and they're all at the beginning, and the beginning of this strike isn't too bad. So once you get past the beginning, all your weapons are matching all the enemy types for the rest of the fight. Whereas if you went solar linear, say you went on Corsair's Wrath, right? So it's like, oh, you're fed up with wizards, you go Corsair's Wrath instead. That would be a bad choice, because when you get to the boss fight, you've got nothing for arc shields, and there's a ton of arc captains, and they need to be taken. They need to be taken out. Not all of them, but most of them. So I really strongly recommend that you go a void weapon and an arc weapon. Void's needed for the boss fight because there's void servitors, and they would take an age to take down, and you really don't want that at the boss fight. Okay, there's a higher risk of dying at the boss than there is anywhere else in this strike. Okay, it's a low risk strike. It's not the hardest GM. It's one of the most enjoyed by me though. I really like this Grandmaster, and just because it's an original Destiny 1 strike type thing, so there's that as well. So when we get onto the free waves, the way I do this is I come to this zone here. This is where you can do 90% of your fighting from. Why is that? Well, because there's nothing that can hit us from the behind. There's nothing that can flank us. Everything gets funneled. All the enemies get funneled into this sort of area here, and you can strafe. And that's the best thing when you're trying to take overloads. Having a bit of cover close is the difference, because he can just shoot. It'll hit the cover. It'll hit the object that's in front of you, and you can just keep continually overloading them. Right. So it's the perfect thing for overloads when you can find cover like this. You'll have a bunch of vandals and things like that pushing you, which aren't a problem. You know, use your turret nades. What you'll find with me is I don't put up turret nades much when I'm dealing with overlords. Now, the reason for that is this. Once you start to overload a champion via... once you stun them with stasis, because they kind of get mini stunned, they get froze, but they're not overloaded per se, right? Say with the turret nade, it's gonna make them regen quicker than what it would without stasis damage being affected, right? So I generally try to, if there's overloads knocking around, I won't do loads of nades. So if you're thinking, why isn't he throwing his nade? He's got his nade back. That's why, okay? Because it just slows the whole process of taking overloads down. It's kind of annoying. But when there's a bunch of ads, like right now, I'm using that nade, okay? Because obviously we've got the Bleak Watcher. So I'll just quickly, briefly mention what that is. Our stasis setup while you're watching it. So we've got Iceflare bolts. These are the aspects. Iceflare bolts, Bleak Watcher. You need that on to enable you to get the turret nade. And then the fragments are Whisper of Torment, Bonds, Durance, and Fissures. Whisper of Torment is a must. It's best in slot. If you're going to use this build, Whisper of Torment, you get great energy while taking damage off enemies. That is pretty basic, and that's happening all the time in GMs, especially solo GMs. You're getting hit all the time. You're getting one shot all the time. So Whisper of Torment's best in class. Number 2 is Durance. Whisper of Durance improves slow, okay, from stasis. The turret nade slows the enemy before it freezes them. Therefore, it improves the nade. It also makes it last longer. The turret nade, I think somebody in Reddit said it lasts 25 seconds. I haven't timed it, but I think it lasts 25 seconds with Whisper of Durance. So that, again, I would say is best in slot. It's making your build better straight away. And then Fissures. I like Fissures. People might not run this and run other variations, but I like Fissures because when you kill a frozen target, it has like burst damage and chains to other enemies. The burst damage is bigger, and that's happening all the time. So Whisper of Fissures is one of my personal ones I would use. And then lastly, Whisper of Bonds. I am only using Whisper of Bonds to counter the fact that I need super energy quite a lot. Whisper of Bonds gives us increased super on, when we kill frozen targets. So that's the only reason. Other than that, I probably would have used Whisper of Chains, which gives you 3 plus 10 recovery, and you tankier closer to frozen targets. So that's the build out of the way. On this particular phase, we now got Solar Wizards. I got kind of unlucky here with the Solar Wizard hiding. They tend to do that. But on this phase, we want to sort of take at least one of the Solar Wizards. By the time you do that, you're going to get a barrier champ spawning. What I decided to do, which wasn't the best sort of plan, but I wanted to suit one of the Solar Wizards. That then spawned in a barrier knight behind me, which obviously at some point we need a super for that barrier, because we're going to consume super energy with AGER'S SCEPTER to then melt the barrier, because we haven't got an auto rifle on, because we can't fit an auto rifle on. Okay, so we're going to have to leave the barrier up. But I could have spawn killed him. In an ideal world, if I got that Solar Wizard back here, which I could have done really, I could have spawn killed the barrier knight that spawned, because he spawns close to where I am now, as you saw, spawn behind me. But what will happen is, if you do leave the barrier knight up, it's not the end of the world, because what will happen is that barrier will lose. He will not aggro on you at all. He will be aggroed on the Solar Wizard, which isn't too bad. The champion, the barrier does arc, so it won't really penetrate the shield, the solar shield that much. But there's other enemies that do solar that can help with taking the Solar Wizard. And if the Solar Wizard's still alive, we'll just keep doing our turret nades. Like you see, I've got a turret nade up here, and just taking the adds while they're preoccupied with each other. Let the Hive and the Fallen fight each other. There's a couple of arc shields. There's at least 3 to 4, 2 resilient captains, and then 2 melee knights. So we can take them with the Tarantula from a distance. That's why I'm not spamming Tarantula. I'm not spamming that weapon on champions, because there's not really a need to. All that's doing is speeding up the run, and then I'm going for a run that I'm trying to farm for time. This is definitely, if people didn't know, I don't farm times on GMs. Very rare, unless it's like a GM that is really farmable. Then I'll go for a time where I'll farm it up. But that was something I used to do a long time ago, just with farming activities in this game for time. If you've been sub to me for a couple of years, you'll know that that's what I used to do. I don't do that stuff now, because the game's transitioned to a different type of game. It's not like that anymore. So that's why I don't play farming times for solo wise. Specifically talking about solo, I'm not talking about team runs and all that stuff. I'm talking about the reason why I'm not farming solo speedrun GMs, because there's literally no point. The average completion time of a solo GM is like, what, 30-40 minutes, and some of them are upwards to over an hour. So I've lost interest in sort of speedrun on GMs. Right, a speedrun in my books on any activity is something between 10 to 20 minutes. So raids 20 minutes, nightfalls 10 minutes or less, and if they're longer than that, I don't regard them as like a speedrun type thing. Okay, so, and GMs are out of the question. They're nowhere near that ballpark. For team runs they are, but I don't upload team runs, I upload the solos. So we got our next phase of overloads. This time there's 2, I believe, on 2 or 3. I've got a stasis turret nade up here. You can see here, this is what I was saying. When you've got a turret nade up and you're trying to continually do damage to an overload, it's just a waste of time. Okay, because that overload's just regenning and regenning. So, but we put a turret nade up to sort of deal with adds, because that's the only thing is, yeah, you might have 2 overloads, but you might have a bunch of vandals or dregs throwing nades at you, so they sort of need to be dealt with, because you don't You can't tank all that damage. You can get pretty weak off just one overload on its own. So that's where you know you're going to get your wipes. Also, you're going to have more trouble when there's two overloads alive. Reason being is because sometimes they can teleport on top of each other, and you think you've overloaded the one that you've been doing, 50% damage to, and he's half HP, and then the other overload teleports right in front of him. You can't do damage. So sometimes you'll have things like that happen, but for the most part, just remain patient. Keep doing your healing risks if you get one shot, which we know with Stag, that's what happens. That's why I've got it on. It's a safer exotic. In my opinion, I've been using it before he got buffed. Now everyone's using it, but I was using it before people realised how good it was. Everyone was using the I Have Another World. I Have Another World's the wrong player for this, especially solo-wise. The Stag is the better choice because there is going to be times you're going to get one shot. It's GM. There's all sorts of things that can happen. So if you get one shot, you get healing rift energy. That's more beneficial to you than the Eye of Another World, because all that's doing is giving you. It's an amazing exotic, but all that's doing is giving you more ability energy. Which, if you have the right stats, you don't need that stuff, because all you need is 100% discipline, and then if you can get 100% recovery as well, and that's great. I couldn't quite fit that out in my build because I had so many mods packed in to my build. I couldn't run full stack mods and things like that. But I ran a T9 recovery with a 100% on the discipline T10. You never use the Aegis Scepter on overloads. You just saw how I failed with it. The only time you would really use it is if the overload is like 10% HP, 15%. But it doesn't work well. This trace rifle is not designed for overloads. It really is just for the barriers, which it is amazing for. Like, it's really good that way. Be careful of the mines and things like that. In terms of modifiers for the Nightfall, like what's on, we've got incoming arc damage is increased and splash damage, I believe it's said. But the resistance that you want to run is arc. So double arc resistance on your chestplate. You need to have an arc chestplate. If you're trying to solo it and you say, oh, I don't have an arc chestplate, I have a solo one, then you're going to have either masterwork one or change it. Simple as that. I wouldn't recommend running any other resistance other than arc, because of how Fallen works, they can sort of shoot you around corners, okay? And just having that extra protection with the arc is really the be all and end all. So I kind of screwed up here, as I didn't realise the barrier was going to put up his shield like that, and I activated the trace to then take the barrier, but then I've lost the super, so that was unfortunate. But you've seen me what I would do with this barrier, what that gameplay looks like. I just had my time and messed up. I should have checked the barrier HP first to see, because obviously he was damaged before from the other enemies. So I wasn't sure of that. I should have checked before rushing. So what we'll do alternatively is use a turret nade and then just use some heavy, and we'll just take him that way. Rather than, I'm not re-waiting up for a super, definitely not. And that's, you can only do that though if there's only one barrier. So you need to take out any other adds before you do that, for it to work effective. And then that's the 3 waves done. On to the next section. This is very small. This part is just like a sniper, like 2 snipers, 3 dregs, something like that, and then an overload captain. Obviously, the goal really is when you fight champions, isolate the champion away from the adds. So take out the adds first. Simple as that. Don't try to be overloading a champion and then trying to kill that champion while there's dregs alive, because one dreg is threatening. Okay, it's how these GMs work. So if a dreg grenades you, that arc grenade will do half HP to you, or more. It will nearly get you one shot, because incoming arc burns on, right? So even one add is a threat. So always think of that. That's why the GM plays, that's why we play GMs the way we do. Very passive. like for solo wise. Very passive because everything is a threat. They finish kill on this overload, and then that's that first section, if you like, done, complete. There was a Drake still alive. He didn't actually aggro at all, which was surprising. Generally they don't do that. So on with the next section. This section is going to be really long because there's a lot of tanky targets to take. There's a lot of champions and things like that, but I can go through it sort of step by step how I done it. But first we want to lead with a turret nade as soon as you can. The quicker you do that, the better, because then you can start dealing with any adds that surround the barrier, because obviously there's a barrier here. These barriers are easier to take than the knights. It doesn't really matter, I suppose, though, because you've got stasis and they freeze anyways. But you want to get those two snipers on the top of the building because they do a lot of damage. So definitely take those. And then once you're happy, there's one ad alive, I believe, still. Once you're happy, you can then activate your trace rifle. We'll do a healing with first, and then just continue your beam. Don't stop your beam until that champion is fully killed. Don't go for the finisher either, not on this setup. And then knock your perk off, because it will consume all your super energy. And then we're down to half, so we're consuming half super. That's the trade-off. You consume half your super to kill a barrier. That's huge because there's not a lot of barriers in this. So that's why it's not too bad running this. Like if there was a lot of more barriers than what there is, then this build wouldn't be as good, because we'd have to be waiting for our super a bit more than what we are. But Font of Wisdom is going to help. You can see we've got that proc, which mod wise we've got Protective Light, Font of Wisdom, Elemental Charge. So we get Charge of Light when we pick up a well. We've got Fire and Ice. For every champion that we kill, we get a stasis off a fire solar well. So when we pick up that well, we get Protective Light because we've got Elemental Charge on. We've also got a shield, an old-fashioned shield break charge, which works out really good for the boss fight. So it's just a Protective Light build. We're not going to high energy fire or anything like that. Don't need it. Safety is more important than damage, you know, generally. Now we're just killing out the adds to the left. There's a couple of snipers all over the place. This is like the initial spawn, if you like. We can come up to this location here and then start to work on snipers. Be careful, some of the snipers can snipe you from here, but generally they're de-aggroed, which means they're not going to really be doing much. But what I'm trying to do here is aggro a overload champion. Because below that hill there is an overload champion. If we can get him stunned, then the champion will be kind of bored and just stand there. This will be consistent as well. As long as you get the stun before he goes to cover, then he'll just stand there, right, like this. So this is perfect. I recommend you do this before you push up, because this whole arena is based on where you stand. So if you push up to where that hill starts to go down, the tank spawns in the two brigs. They're your key targets. But the overload's going to sort of be protected by the brigs and things like, because you can't really push the overload until the brigs are killed, because the brigs can really melt you down. So this is actually like a win. If you can get an overload down before brigs spawn in like this, then that's a big plus. It's going to make it easier. It makes the fight easier later on. Then we can start working on snipers at the back of the map. Which, if 2 or 3 snipers hit you all at once, which is entirely possible, it's really, like, it's high risk here, don't get me wrong. If that happens, you're wiped. Okay, we're 25 minutes in, you have to reset your run. That's time lost. It's going to get you angry and you have to reset it. So you don't want that happening. So you want to make precautions. As I said, it's a safer run, this. So anytime you can take snipers out on a phase before tanks and things spawning, because you've got to keep an eye on the tank. You've got to keep an eye on the brigs, because the brigs really, they really do wander. The tanks, not so much. You can control the tank to a certain degree. You know, you can kind of avoid the tank, but the brigs, they can walk all around. They might shoot at you from an angle you wouldn't expect. So those are what you need to deal with first. As soon as we push up and we're happy, like I'm not going to take out every single ad because there is a barrier champion at the hill you saw, and he's just going to keep tethering a lot of the ads. So I'm not going to take out everything, but I'm going to take out what I can. The barrier champion, by the way, that'll be the last barrier you take. We will take that barrier at the very end. So we'll actually kill the tank first, the 2 brigs and all that stuff. You can also do turret nades from back here. If you want to slow down the snipers, that can get good damage in while they're frozen. Because they tend just to obviously strafe a lot, go into cover, but if you can get a nade on then it's free damage. Watch this nades, always be careful of grenades. But they're thrown too far, so that's fine. Okay, so we're pretty much happy with that. We'll take out the remainder ads here. We get weak off a dreg here. That's we pushed aggressive, protective light kicks in, and then we have the 2 brigs. The ship spawns in. Be careful of the skiff as well, because the skiff will do a lot of damage and can sometimes on a rare occasion, one-shot you because the splash damage is increased and arc damage is increased, and the skiff does both of those. Splash damage, when they say splash damage is increased, that's basically if there's an enemy that does an attack where it shoots at a wall and that sort of like does damage to you, but it's not a direct hit, that's classed as splash damage, right? So what does splash damage? Well, the brigs do splash damage, the servitors do splash damage, the boss does splash damage, the tank does splash damage with its arc attack and its solar attack, which is a full-on one-shot. Like if that's a direct hit, that's it. But if you fight on this left-hand side, see there's a left-hand side and the right-hand side. The right-hand side is not very good. I found it to be really bad. All the ads hide. You can get sniped quite often. On the left-hand side, you can see here, nothing's really hitting me. Only the 1 brig, which we can use a turret nade to continually freeze them. And we could take them safely from here, really, to be honest. I would recommend, using a bit of the trace rifle, consuming a bit of super here and there if you want. Or you could use a full Shadebinder super alternatively. I could have done that. I just wanted to sort of showcase more the trace. I only ended up using my super, like my actual Shadebinder super, twice in the whole run. And that's only times when, I felt like I needed to use it. But generally, I'm using it more for the trace. When the brig gets to a 3rd HP, you'll then reveal their crit spots, and then you can do a bit of linear if you wish. But just be careful when that happens, because the brig will then hover and then do a one-shot sword explosive attack. Especially if you get caught in it. So you need to be wary and retreat. If you're going to commit to killing the brig there and then, that's fine. But I wasn't, because I didn't have any heavy I didn't see any heavy bricks on the floor, like as of right now. So I wasn't wanting to commit to using too much heavy, because I've got a lot of heavy to use on the tank. You want to save a good amount of heavy for damage on the tank, because the tank is a slow kill. It takes quite a long time. I was really lucky there though. Obviously, always pop your healing rifts when you're in trouble. The brig from the right was pushing us, which is why that made it dangerous. As I said, they do wander. So where we're standing now is somewhere where the tank definitely can't hit us. So this is the best place, so we can damage the brig without having to worry about the tank. Doing the turret nade does make it a lot safer as well, as you can see. It actually stops the brig from doing his attack. When he goes to the fight where he hovers, you can actually stop him from doing his solar move with stasis. We should say that on this. We've got another super, so we'll use a bit of damage. We'll use a bit of Aegis. on the brig just to sort of speed it up. Plus, you're going to get a ton of special bricks. Particularly in this Nightfall, you seem to get a lot of ammo drops. It's not like... whereas with Corrupted, it wasn't like that. Corrupted, you were always struggling for ammo, and this is why. When you fight taken enemies in Lake of Shadows or Corrupted, if the mod is on where when you kill a Scion or whatever, they spawn like a taken boop thing, that boops ammo off the map, right? That's what makes it such a bad design. So the game's going to think you've had all that ammo and you haven't. So you're going to struggle for ammo all the time. On a Nightfall like this, it's a very low chance of you lose. It's nearly impossible to lose ammo. The only times where that can happen is if you kill a tank, the tank will explode, and actually, if the tank drops ammo, the ammo will just fly, like you don't know where it goes. So there's things like that, but for the most part, ammo is very consistent in this GM compared to, say, as I said, Corrupted and Taken Nightfalls particularly, or any sort of strikes where there's maps where you can fall off or ammo can fall off. I've said for a long time, just make ammo have no physics. I don't understand why ammo is rolling about and things like that. Like, why has it got physics? Like, that's not, there's no strategy to that. It's like, well, you've killed the enemy, you've done good, but the game is punishing you and having ammo fall off the map. And ammo's more important now in the game than it ever has been, even before D1. Or even, like, say, D2 vanilla. Because as champions, it's as simple as that. So ammo is so important now, and we've still got silly things like that where we're losing ammo. It just shouldn't be a thing. This is where you DPS the tank. This is the safest place I can see where you can DPS the tank. We've got box breathing on our Tarantula, so we're going to just take it slow. We're going to have each shot. Try to just, if you're going to use a roll like what I've got, to get the most damage out of Tarantula, right, it's not DPS, it's damage, it's total damage. To get your total damage up, just use box breathing on every shot that you do. The only problem with this tank here is it's crit spot, man. Felt as though I was hitting the crit, but it wasn't counting, which was unfortunate. So we lost a bit of damage there. But ideally you want to break the two front legs, get a bit of damage in the core. Then by the time you've broken all four legs, that tank should be just about dead. Once you run out of heavy, which I do recommend you spend all your heavy, because your ammo finders are going to kick in. When you're low on a particular weapon, the game will give you ammo for that off enemies. Right, there's a higher chance of it, but the ammo finders will make it even better, because you're going to get them bricks on top of a standard brick. You're getting an ammo finder brick, and if you combine that with your scavengers on your boots, so I've got trace rifle, ammo finder, trace rifle, scavenger and ammo finder, and the fusion rifle scav mod with a linear fusion ammo finder. All that just synergizes really well, so when I do run out of ammo, there's a lot of ammo to sort of fill back up on. The only problem is on this phase, once you do run out the heavy, it's sort of hard to go and get that right now, because there's a tank that can one-shot you if you push up. So it's too dangerous to do that, unless you're on maybe like Hunter Night Stalker, or if you popped a super and maybe went about it that way, then you could do, but I wouldn't recommend that either, because you're going to want a super coming up for the barrier that's in the middle. You can also use your turret nades on the tank. That will actually slow the tank down. It actually does have an effect where it will stop him from doing his arc attack and his solar attack. You can see he's slowed now because he's not doing his attack, or he's taken longer to do it. Break another leg here. That's good. I'm going to do some damage in the middle. Also be aware of when you're fighting the tank, it might sound silly, but don't just look at the tank. Like if you're on the top building like me, this is a good place to stand because of a few reasons. The tank can't really hit you. the skiffs spawn in randomly. Not randomly, I suppose they're time based. They spawn in every now and then. If I'm somewhere on left or right and I don't see that, because I can't see the skybox as good, I have got maximum FOV, right? But I can see the skybox better if I'm up here. So if a skiff does come, I'll retreat. Okay, because the skiff, I remember in the previous seasons when this was up as a GM, a skiff has one-shot me in this. So once you've had that sort of experience happen, and you're sort of mad about it, you'll learn from that and you'll be like, right, I don't care if it takes me longer, I'm retreating when that skiff comes to make sure the skiff doesn't kill me. End of. Sometimes the skiff will come down and there's no ads on the skiff, because the skiffs are meant to drop ads, right? And they will. But after so long, the skiff just comes along with no ads on and then flies away. But while that's happening, the skiff can, as I say, one-shot you. It depends on what you're close to. If you're close to like the environment, that's where you're getting your one-shots off the skiff. If you're just sort of like in mid-air and the skiff hits you, then that's not going to one-shot you. So now we can push up a little bit. There's marauders under the bridge. Always remember that. If you didn't take them out from the first, like before the tank came up, then always remember there's marauders. They are deadly. They can get you like red bar off one melee alone. So if that's 2 marauders meleeing you, that's a death. You can see the skipper spawning if you saw that. So I went under the bridge and out of the way. That way he couldn't take us. So now I was just considering my best move, because I've still got, I believe, 2 overload captains, 2 or 3 with the barrier. I wasn't sure on AGER'S SCEPTER's range drop off, right? I don't know how the weapon works. I haven't used the weapon enough to know what its range drop off, so I was considering melting the barrier from back here, but I wasn't sure if the weapon would be able to do the job, because that was a good bit of range where you saw the barrier was. And the problem is, if I push up to the red box, is like a red crate, then all the ads from middle in the sort of valley area, whatever you call it, they'll nade you to death. They'll just keep nading you, and you're gonna find it difficult. And what I remembered from a previous run that I'd done in a previous season, was if you come back to this area, an overload will push you, like so, but you'll just stand. Once you get the rhythm of the overload, like here, that's a free overload kill. Right now, this is free, okay? Because this overload isn't going to push us. Okay, the AI is limited, right? A lot of people say how good all the champions are, right? But why can't this overload captain realise that he needs to push me? This is what I don't understand. Maybe they do it to balance it so that the champions aren't too difficult. You know, maybe it would be a bit absurd, but it's like, well, yeah, they're good, but they're not that good as well, because if I was fighting over the left-hand side, that champion would be more difficult. But if I'm fighting him from here, he forgets. He just stands there. So, you know, I don't know how good that really is. You know, it's fine for the clear. I'll take it all day, but is it fun just doing that? Not really, you know. So now we can push up, because that overload was taken out. Okay, because that overload would give us a lot of grief. But now what we want to do is bait this barrier. All the ads in middle are taken out, which is good. So we can come to the red box, like so. We're in good range now. I know that for sure. Activate your super perk on the gun. And just take the barrier out. Obviously, don't deactivate that perk until that barrier is taken. It's very important, because that barrier, you need to take the barrier before the overload, because the overload is going to be tethered by the barrier. So the barrier is the key. Once you do the barrier, which is fine, because if the overload is next to the barrier, which will happen, the overload will get frozen while you deal with the barrier. So this works out really good. As soon as the barrier is taken out, I push back. Again, this is what I'm on about these overloads. Their range drop off. They've got like a 20 meter, a 15 meter range, and then that's it. They forget. This overload is dumb. He's forgot about me. He's just sitting there, right? So I can just keep continually overloading them until he's dead. There'll be an arc captain, a bunch of vandals. Most of the snipers I took out early. It depends on how you do it. If you didn't take the snipers on the first phase before the tanks spawned in, you've got all them to take out. So be careful about that. This is the time, once the overload goes, get your turret nades up. But as I said, don't put a turret nade up if you're taking the overload. Get a turret nade up once the overload's taken out. Be wary of any nades, always be on the move. That way. You can shoot the you can shoot their nades down as well, you can do that, but I prefer just to strafe or move out of cover. And once most adds are taken, we can push up a little bit further. You can see I've got special ammo everywhere. You can see how much ammo I've got. This is the ammo finders and all that stuff just working out really good. And the fact that the ammo is consistent in this GM. I wish all the GMs were like this. This is the final overload to deal with. Same thing again. We always use a bit of cover. This is a pillar to my right. So he's actually shooting us, so he's aware, but we're strafing outside of his shots. This is what makes bows the best primary, the best PvE primary weapons in the game. They're better than scouts, although scouts are really good now, don't mind. Scouts and hand cannons are amazing. But the reason why bow is better because you can strafe in out of cover so well with a bow, because it's just a one-shot thing. Obviously, it's just one bow each shot. But it lends itself to strafe. It makes them the best. They're still the best primary for PvE in D2. Like, but people don't realise, they don't think of it like that, but they actually are. Especially when it's overload bow, like especially. Which I could have used Le Monarch. I could have went Le Monarch and used that style of setup. With a heavy linear again and then a kinetic auto. Could have went that route. And then we'll just make our way to the final boss. There'll be 3 overloads before the final boss though. And that's the tank section dealt with anyways. So once you get to the 3 overload section, you want to start taking out a couple of the dregs first. As many as you can. But ideally you want to isolate one of the overloads from the other. The best way of doing that is getting the overload to sort of the left side of this door, like so. As soon as you get one round about there, then you've just isolated the other overload and a bunch of the dregs. The dregs can nade you a little bit though, like you saw, but just make sure you're putting up your healing rifts, because if you do get weak off a nade, then you're going to get healing rift energy with the stag. So you can just re-healing up on that. But your goal is to take out one overload, you know, as best as you can. Try not to use heavy. You want a lot of heavy for the boss fight. I would recommend just not using any heavy. You could use a heavy. You could use it if you want. It's up to yourself. It doesn't really matter in the end. It's just that you're going to have more ammo for when you need it. Right now, this isn't difficult. It's just about isolating the champs. Once you take out one, then I would recommend just taking out the rest of the dregs before you deal with the overload. If you want to stun the overload, you can stun an overload without the intention of damaging him, but just to stun him so that it gives you that 2 seconds just to take out the remainder of dregs. Then when you're happy, start taking out the overload, which is the same way again. As I said, it's a must that you have like a frenzy bow or an overload bow or even explosive head bow. The only thing is there's not many void bows legendary wise. There's Le Monarch, which is the best bow in the game for overloads, but obviously I wasn't going for that type of setup, but I would highly recommend it. If you want to do the Le Monarch strat, then go for it. If you want to use Tikus, which you can do that. It's not as good on overloads, but it's an exceptional bow for ag clear. Okay, I'm not saying that Le Monarch's better than Tikus or the other way around. They're just better at different things, but they're both. I'm sort of more on the side for Le Monarch over Tikus, but I can see that why Tikus is so good as well. I use them both. Okay, I'm not favoritism. It's just I use them both. I do think Le Monarch's a little bit more consistent because it's got really good damage on overloads. So once you take out the final ad, you're then going to be have the boss remove a shield. I used a super, consuming the super on the trace just to see what damage it would do. It didn't do too bad damage, but that's not really what you would be using it for. I just wanted to see what it would be. As soon as the phase starts though, these overload captains push. Right, now I was charged with light, so when I got meleeed, protective light kicked in, but then I broke his shield. This is where shield break charge comes in really good, so you can essentially just farm protective lights up off these ads, especially when the server's coming, because as I said, I've got shield break charge, get charge of light when you break, and matching shield. So that's why it's so important having the shield break. So the fire and ice build works for all the way up into the boss, because you're getting protective lights off champs, and there's a lot of champs, so that deals with that. And then for the boss fight, this is where the shield break comes in. However, there are 2 overloads to take, so it will help out for that as well. This is where you do the majority of your fighting, from this doorway. I'm sure you'll know if you haven't saw runs already, which I'm sure you will have done. So I'm doing the same strat as what we've always sort of done, but there's no other better place to stand. Like, this is the best place because ads don't push you so much. You can get the odd captain coming in here, or maybe like a dreg with the Lord of Wolves weapon. Those specific dregs, not just the dregs that nade. There's different types of dregs, there's different rank and file enemies. You got to know all that, really what you're up against. Knowing that gives you the edge, and that edge can be the difference between dying and not, and knowing the differences of what enemies do when you start wandering the map. What happens? Do the ads follow you? Some do, some don't. Sometimes I've had overloads in here, sometimes they do that. It just depends on whether you've aggroed them, and you can aggro them just by going close. If you go close to a champion and you haven't stunned him, there's a bit of RNG there on where he teleports. Or he can just flat out follow you, try and melee you. Things like that can happen. So you've got to be really careful what you're doing. This is where I like to DPS on the boss quite a lot. I used a bit of linear and a bit of the Aegis again. You can DPS with whatever you want really. You could just use the bow if you wanted. But once you get him to just above a 3rd HP, this is where you get your void servitors. This is why void's so important, right? Because I'm not wasting heavy to take the shield. If I was using, so let's give you an example. If I was using the wolf tone draw arc bow with a threaded needle, which is void, if I'm not on a void subclass like void walker, like I'm not on void walker, then I'm going to struggle taking out the void shield, because it means I've got to waste precious heavy ammo on just some silly servitors. So that's where the void primary is really the best choice, because you're only really using heavy then on the arc captains, which you don't mind doing because they can be a pain, and then on the boss. It doesn't matter if you're on a subclass that's really good for void, like Night Stalker or Void Walker. They have abundance of void in their subclass usage, right? So that's fine. But if you're not using a void subclass, then it's not fine. You've really got to then match your burns with your weapons. Right, so I'm not just using Imperial Needle because I really favour this bow. It's because it's void, and it's a really good void bow. And also another reason why is because I like using the Tarantula, because it's got field prep. And I've went on and on about how good field prep is. Probably one of the best solo perks in the game for heavies and things like that, because ammo wise, it stacks with scavenger perks. It stacks with all the ammo mods that you can put on your armor. So you get so much more ammo per brick, and I very rarely run out of ammo for this weapon because of that. And it's got a quick reload when you crouch, and it's got the increased damage on box breathing, so it's high. It's got a really high total damage. It hasn't got the burst damage of Threaded Needle, but you don't need the burst damage. Okay, people think you need the burst damage for solo GMs and things. You don't, because you take them slow anyways. There isn't a skill set in GMs for that, for the solo. If you just talk them purely clears, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. If you're going for a speedrun time, then that's different. You do need the burst damage. Okay? If you want a sub 20-minute team run, you do need the burst damage. If you want a really quick solo run, you do need that. But if you're just talking, I just want to solo this GM, you don't need burst damage. It's total damage is that you want. That's why Witherhoard's so good. Not very good burst damage, but it's total damage and its utility of killing adds the way it can, making it the king now, right? People used to say, oh, anarchy. Well, Witherhoard's always kind of been really good, and it's like now at the top. Like if you look at most of 90% of the solos on GMs now, it's generally Witherhoard, a bow, and then a linear. If it's Overload, bow, and unstoppable champs. Obviously this one isn't, but you know, most of the Nightfalls this season are Overload and unstoppable. There's only a couple with barriers, which is why Witherhoard's so good. Witherhoard would have been good on this one, but it's hard to fit a build. It's hard to make a Witherhoard build work, because what do you do then? So right, you use Witherhoard, that's fine. Then what you're going to use? You're going to use a barrier auto energy or a bow. Well, you need the bow. Like it's a must using a bow because you need them for the champs. I mean, you can use the stasis thing, but I'm not like a fan of using like class mods to stun champs. Like, because it's not good for consistent stunning when you solo. When we take the 4 void servitors, you can get some free damage on, but the boss will then teleport. That will then trigger a ad phase. Every time you break the boss's shield and things like that, an ad phase begins. So there's 2 ad phases going at once for each. So there's 3 main phases, but for each phase it ramps up. So for the first phase you saw, there's 2 arc melee captains on the phase before this. And there's also shanks and things like that, but the shanks are an independent spawn. The shanks just keep spawning over and over. They spawn maybe every minute to minute, maybe 1 minute 30 seconds, something like that, while you're fighting dregs and things. So they just keep coming, which is actually a good thing because they drop you ammo. So you can kind of spam ammo here, right? Because if you get to a point where you're low on ammo, just wait for shanks. You can wait in this room. There's no time limit, right? You can wait in this room, wait for some special, wait for some heavy. You know, use your AGER'S SCEPTER if you're using it, this type of setup. Use it for AgClear because it's exceptional for that. And it does really good damage against Grandmaster adds. Better than, you know, a lot of other weapons I can think of for AgClear purpose. And it's obviously synergizing with the Shadebinder setup, right? So there's that. Obviously be putting up a turret nade every now and then. Like as soon as you put one up and it runs out, if you've got another one, just keep putting them up, keep chaining them. The boss on this second phase will teleport all around the map. I wasn't in a position to do damage at this moment. You really need to be concerned with adds. Okay? Like your main concern is ad clear. It's not rushing through phase 2 or phase 3. Well, phase 3 is kind of different, but for phase 2, you definitely don't want to be rushing it. If you do want to do a bit of damage to the boss safely, you can go below and do a peak shot, especially with what I've got, like a box breathing Tarantula. You can just do the 1 shot and then retreat. Because the boss hits hard in this. He does like these 2 void blast attack. If they are direct hits, that gets you red bar. And if you combine a auto tracking vandal with the arc shots hitting you, that can wipe you. It actually nearly happened to me on this run. If you overcommit to damage, that's how you'll die. And I overcommitted a couple of times, but Protective Light saves me. I was farming up the Protective Lights off the Void Shields and Arc Shields. So the build was working and helped me out that way. Some ads will come below, so this is your lower section. So I do recommend you've got to take those out for sure, because there's at times you want to come down here. So we do a turret nade and then we'll use a bit of Aegis. Just take those out, because we're still on phase 2, and I do want to push this phase if possible, so we can, you know, initiate the next with the servitors. You won't get any overload champions until the final phase, which is probably going to be the most difficult for people because of what can happen with the overloads. But there is a sort of way of controlling them to an extent, which I'll go into. So it's saying here champion has appeared. You can see bottom left. Next phase has begun. On this final phase, you want to focus. I would suggest do your turret nade in middle, because you'll get nade energy off all that, off all the ads and things. But ideally, you want to take out 3 of the void servitors. There's one void servitor that can't really see you, and it's the top left one. So if you get the 2 middle void servitors and the far right void servitor, that will then mean they aren't going to do splash damage to you. It will then make things safer for you when you're trying to get ammo, or you're trying to maybe you need to finish a champ, which can be quite risky. I wouldn't recommend it if there's a bunch of ads up, because you can sort of take damage while you're finishing an enemy and then just get melted. Unless you've got a super, which you can use that after you kill a champ. I think I end up doing that on this phase. Or it might have been, yeah, I think it is this phase. Just because there's so many ads up. So this is where I chose the Roman super over the Aegis just for this bit. I think it was on this phase or coming up. I've got this overload half HP. We keep popping our healing rifts. Just be careful, because ads can still hit you through this window. But sometimes they don't as well. They get stuck on the window. You can see the attacks are just sort of flowing. The best thing to do is just keep strafing, because the attacks might come through still. You saw I was getting weak there at times. So, but that's overload number 1 taken out. The first overload's easy to take. It's the second one that's the pain. What you must do is have the room clear. All the room must be cleared of shanks, everything, before you start dealing with that overload. Plus the 3 void servitors must be taken out, because what it is with the overload is his AI changes when, if there's 2 overloads together, they push you. Okay. When one overload goes, the other overload will teleport to other locations on the map, anywhere but where you want. So it might cause you to have to push the overload, which is why you have the full arena taken out, all shanks taken out, all orange bar, vandals, stuff like that, marauders, anything that's up you need to take them, because it might require you to come out of this room and actually stun the champ like that. I don't end up doing that. I think I end up getting a lucky teleport. That's another thing. You might get a lucky teleport where he teleports right in front of you. You get your stun and you can go from there. Also, having a bit of linear fusion for the second overload is handy. If you want to spam heavy on the second overload, I would strongly recommend doing it, because once you do that, you're a clean run. Your platinum's done. All you need to do then is take down the final void shields for the servitor and do damage to the boss, and you're done. You're on a clean run by then. Okay, so that's your final hurdle, if you like, the second overload. See how we're losing charge of light, but we're refarming it up, so it's worth keeping it. That's another reason why it's worth keeping the servitors up, like at least 1 or 2, because when you get weak, refarm up a charge of light. Easy as. This is so much better than the taking charge. For this fight specific, because you don't have to go out your way to pick up the orb of light. You just break the shield from this room and get a free protective light. So, and it's only 1 energy cost. So it's really good that way. This knight was giving me this captain, sorry, was giving us problems, and he was teleporting a lot. That happens, I guess. Just try to freeze them. That's your best bet. This overload is in that corridor room, which isn't a good place. It might look a good place because there's cover from most of the ads. Once I start to go out there, any captains, any arc captains, melee ones, marauders, things like that, they can come up behind you and just kill you. Once you're out of this room. The AI changes. Once you push out of this room, all the ads will push you. Right now they will just sort of attack you from a distance. So it might look safe, but it's not. It's not quite safe yet to push. Still a lot of vandals over the other side, which are doing their tracking shots, so they are key to take out. The turret nade's helping out though. This is where the turret nade helps out massively, just with controlling ads and things for this boss. There's an arc captain over the other side of the map. Try and do damage to him as much as possible, but I actually ran out of linear here, so we just take what we can. But I believe all the arc shields are taken out, most of them, just that last one. We're getting weak again. This is where the stasis is going to have to really help us out. This knight, oh there's two actually, This captain actually pushed us. So I had to emergency use a stasis. This was just showing you how good Scepter is. When things don't go your way, like even if you don't want to use that super, like to freeze them like that with the power beam, it's totally worth doing. It's totally worth doing, just melting down a captain. The other captain's really weak. I'll just finish him with the trace and then he's done. Now we get another shank phase, so we'll have to deal with the shank phase before we can sort of think about this overload. A bad thing about this is if you do a stasis nade, which you're gonna, it will also lock the overload captain in place. So he won't teleport where you want him, which is actually kind of a bad thing. So that's another thing. You need to wait for the turret to run out, because as I said earlier, when a captain is frozen, your overload damage is not the same as what normal overload damage is. He did teleport on us right here though, which was good. I'm not sure if I get him on this phase. He ends up pushing us there, so I retreated just in case. There are ways of aggroing him though. You can sort of push out and sometimes he'll teleport on your last location and then you can get a stun. You can do it like that. But you will experience trouble with him. There is RNG with this last one, but we aggroed him enough for him to re-teleport up in middle, which means we can now just bow him. Generally, I would have liked to use heavy on him, but as I said, I would run out of heavy, but there was a bunch of heavy in middle, which I will get. It's just not safe to get the heavy yet, as there's still a servitor up, there's the boss up, and the overload could have teleported on top of us while we're getting heavy, so we just had to take him with the bow. Here's another shank phase, as I said. The shank's on that timer. Then we can do the nade to easily deal with the shanks. There's a bunch of special on the floor, so I'm just gonna spam the trace. May as well. But that's us done basically for this final phase. We can take down the final void shield, and then at that point, for the most part, you're just doing damage to the boss. But it isn't totally plain sailing. You've got to kill some of the ads up, to be honest, just to stay alive, because if you fully overcommit to the damage, you could wipe. But there was a little nice strat I found at the very end, which you end up seeing. I didn't think of doing it until the end. I wish I'd thought of it earlier. To speed up damage just a little bit, so you can do free damage while the ads don't interfere with you so much. We're max on heavy, which is really good for the final phase, because that means we can just spam our linear, which it does a lot of damage, because obviously particle deconstruction, and this boss isn't tanky. It's not actually counted as a boss, it's counted as a vehicle. So boss spec wouldn't be a bad idea on your linear, but you've got to think about, would you rather have more damage just to one boss, or would you rather have more damage to like 20 champions? So in other words, major spec's a better player than the boss, rather than boss spec. We use a super here just to clear out, there's so much ads, so I found it beneficial just to use a super. If you're going to do that though, leave about 20% to 10% of super energy left. That's your retreat, because that's your exit plan, because you're still getting the super damage resistance if you leave a little bit left, so it gives you enough time to get back to the room, to the safe room. Whereas if you just go ham on the super and you're in the middle of the map, your super runs out, you'll die. It could be an instant wipe. So even though you know you're safe, you're not if you use all the super. So you got to save a bit for the retreat, for the plan B. Now we're just taking out the rest of the ads. We really could have done the fight now, to be honest. What the strat would be, you come down below because there's no ads there, and you could just do a lot of damage. The only thing is, the ads up above will do damage to you. Now, when he gets to about 10 to 15% HP, he'll spawn in another wave of fallen. Another skiff will come in. I think he's like, what, 10, he's about 20% now, so another skiff spawning in. So we aren't able to sort of finish, and he will teleport out of your view. But it is a good place to do damage. It is the best place on the map, especially on phase 3. That's your final wave of ads. But the best strat is to put a turret nade down below. It's actually not worth your while coming up here, which I figured out at the very end. But regardless, I mean, this was literally my first run with the weapon. So it just shows you how good it was. I know Devil's Lair, as I said, it's not the hardest GM, but it is a patience game, and it is quite long, to be fair, as far as GMs go. But that's the whole idea of doing these runs, is so that someone can watch it, emulate it, learn from it, and they get their run easier, probably, and they get the loot. That's the whole idea behind it. There's a bunch of our captains that spawn in this final phase as well, but as I said, you'll find that you don't need to take them. Just with the strat we do at the end, because he's literally four linear shots and the boss will be dead. There's a couple of ads that spawn down below, so we do need to take those out for the strat, for the damage, which we use Aegis for, because we really don't need Aegis for anything else now at this point. Because as I said, probably about 5 linear shots left. We've got 13, so we can just spam for ad clear. The super wouldn't have been a good idea, as in using the Roman super on the boss, because it just wouldn't do the damage, and he's up in the air. If you even go anywhere near the boss, he will do like his enrage attack with the void, so it's not ideal. So as you can see, I'm taking damage from the ads above, from the top platform with their curving bullets. This is what's annoying with it. But what I end up deciding to do is freeze them from down here, so that they stop attacking me, so I only have to worry about the boss. And that way I can get my linear shots in. Because look, I mean, I'm only getting hit once or twice there, and I'm nearly red bar, just because of that one ad. But if you do a turret nade round about here, that will freeze the ads on the upper platform. You can do a healing rift and what have you, and then just do DPS. Eventually they will freeze. the frozen, so that gives us that few seconds of extra damage, and then we can get the kill. So that was a safe way of doing this Devil's Lair solo GM with this trace rifle. As I said, I'm not messing around. It's actually a good loadout. Team wise, it's actually a good loadout. Solo wise, it melts barriers. So what more could you want? That was the video. Hope you enjoyed. Thank you.